My name is Madeline. I am 29 years old, and I will never forget my father's 60th birthday. Not because I was there, but because I was told not to come. His exact words through my stepmother were simple: "No children allowed. Do not come." What I did not know then was that rule only applied to me. So I made other plans. And when my father saw who I was dining with that night, he looked like he had seen a ghost. Before I share what happened, let me know where you are watching from today. If family dynamics and secrets resonate with you, hit that like button and subscribe. Because the man sitting across from me at dinner was someone my father told everyone had been dead for 15 years. I grew up in Minneapolis, Minnesota, in a neighborhood where the houses were modest and the winters were brutal. My father, Gerald Harrison, worked as a financial consultant at a prestigious firm downtown. He wore expensive suits and drove a car that looked out of place on our street. My mother, Susan, was an elementary school teacher. She had a gentle voice and a patience that seemed endless. For the first 10 years of my life, I thought we were happy. I remember Saturday mornings when my father would make pancakes. I remember my mother laughing at his terrible jokes. I remember feeling safe. But memories can be deceiving. They show you the good parts and blur out the warning signs. Looking back now, I can see the cracks that were forming even then. My father stayed late at work more often than other fathers. He missed school plays and parent-teacher conferences. When he was home, his mind seemed elsewhere. And then came the arguments. I was 10 years old the first time I heard my parents really fight. It was late at night, and I was supposed to be asleep. Their voices traveled through the thin walls of our house. My mother was crying. My father was cold. I could not make out all the words, but I understood the tone. Something was breaking. From that point on, the fights became more frequent. My father started going on business trips that lasted weeks instead of days. When he returned, the distance between my parents had grown wider. My mother tried to hide it from me. She smiled too brightly and hugged me too tightly. But I knew. Children always know when something is wrong, even if they cannot name it. By the time I turned 12, the pretense was over. My parents sat me down in the living room one afternoon. My mother held my hand. My father sat in the armchair across from us looking at the floor. They told me they were getting a divorce. They said it was not my fault. They said they both loved me. I nodded and said I understood. But I did not understand. Not really. How could two people who had built a life together simply decide to tear it apart? The divorce was finalized quickly. My mother got custody of me and we stayed in the house while my father moved to an apartment across town. I saw him on weekends at first. He would pick me up on Saturday mornings and we would go to breakfast or the movies. He asked me about school and told me about his work. Those weekends felt awkward, like we were strangers trying to remember how to be father and daughter. Then the weekends became every other weekend. Then once a month, then barely at all. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, my father called to say he had someone he wanted me to meet. Her name was Victoria. He described her as a wonderful woman who made him very happy. I could hear the excitement in his voice. It was a tone I had never heard him use when talking about my mother. I met Victoria on a Sunday afternoon at a restaurant downtown. She was beautiful in a polished, intimidating way. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled. Her nails were manicured. Her clothes looked expensive. She smiled at me when we were introduced, but the smile did not reach her eyes. She looked at me the way someone might look at a piece of furniture they are not sure fits the room. With Victoria were her 2 children from her previous marriage. Stephanie was 14, 2 years older than me. She had her mother's blonde hair and her mother's cold smile. Brandon was 11, a year younger than me. He barely looked up from his phone during the entire meal. My father could not stop smiling. He kept touching Victoria's hand and laughing at things she said that were not particularly funny. At one point, he turned to me and said something I have never forgotten. He said, "Victoria is going to be part of our lives now. I hope you can be nice to her kids. Be nice to her kids, not the other way around." Even at 12 years old, I noticed that distinction. Over the following months, I tried to build a relationship with Stephanie and Brandon. I really did. When I visited my father's new apartment, I attempted to engage them in conversation. I asked Stephanie about her school and her friends. She responded with one-word answers and eye rolls. I asked Brandon if he wanted to play video games. He said no without explanation. They treated me like an inconvenience, a reminder of a life their new stepfather had before their mother. And my father did nothing to change their behavior. He was too focused on making Victoria happy, too focused on building this new, perfect family. I was just the awkward remnant of his previous life. A year after the divorce, my father and Victoria got married. The wedding was held at an exclusive country club in Edina, the wealthy suburb where Victoria owned a house. It was a lavish affair with hundreds of guests and flowers everywhere. I was invited, of course, but I had no role in the ceremony. Stephanie served as junior bridesmaid in a beautiful lavender dress. Brandon was the ring bearer, looking uncomfortable but important. I sat at a table near the back with some of Victoria's distant relatives I had never met. No one talked to me. No one introduced me to anyone. I watched my father dance with Victoria, then with Stephanie. He looked happier than I had ever seen him. When the reception ended and I hugged him goodbye, he patted my back absent-mindedly and said he would call me soon. He did not call for 3 weeks. After the wedding, my father moved into Victoria's house. It was a massive home with 5 bedrooms and a pool. Stephanie and Brandon each had their own rooms, their own bathrooms, their own spaces that reflected their personalities. When I visited, I slept in a guest room that could have belonged to anyone. There were no photos of me on the walls, no sign that I had any connection to this place. Victoria made it clear through small gestures that I was a guest, not family. She would set the dinner table with 4 place settings, then act surprised when I appeared. Oh, she would say, "I forgot you were coming. Let me get another plate." My father never noticed. Or if he did, he chose not to say anything. He was too busy enjoying his new life. The big house, the country club membership, the vacations to Europe that I was never invited on. He had traded his old family for an upgrade, and I was not part of the package. The disparity became more obvious as the years passed. My father paid for Stephanie and Brandon to attend private schools. He bought Stephanie a car for her 16th birthday. He sent Brandon to summer camps that cost more than my mother made in a month. Meanwhile, I attended public school. I wore clothes from discount stores. I worked part-time jobs starting at 15 to save money for things I needed. When it came time to apply for college, my father had promised to help with tuition. I had good grades and had been accepted to several schools. I was excited about the future. Then came the conversation that shattered that excitement. I called my father to discuss which school I should choose based on what he could contribute. He sighed heavily and said times were tight. He said maybe I should look into loans. He said he was sure I would figure it out. That same year, Stephanie started at Northwestern University, full tuition paid by my father. I did not even bother to ask why. I already knew the answer. I enrolled at the University of Minnesota. I worked 2 part-time jobs to cover living expenses. I took out student loans that would take me years to pay off, and I tried not to think about the unfairness of it all. I told myself that my father's money was his to spend however he wanted. I told myself that I did not need his help. I told myself that I was strong and independent and capable. But late at night in my tiny dorm room, I would sometimes cry. Not because I wanted money, but because I wanted a father who saw me, who valued me, who loved me as much as he loved the children who were not even his own blood. That father did not exist. Maybe he never had. Growing up, I had very few stories about my father's side of the family. My mother's parents, Grandma Rose and Grandpa Frank, were a constant presence in my life. They came to my school performances. They took me to the zoo. They sent birthday cards with crisp $20 bills inside. But my father's parents were mysteries. When I asked about them as a child, my father's answers were brief and dismissive. "My mother passed away when you were a baby," he would say. "Heart attack. Very sudden. We were not close. There were no photographs of my paternal grandparents in our house, no stories of childhood memories, no visits to graves or memorial services. It was as if that entire side of my family had simply ceased to exist. My paternal grandmother, I learned, had died when I was around 2 years old. Her name was Eleanor, and cancer had taken her quickly. I had no memories of her, only the vague knowledge that she had once existed. My grandfather, I was told, had passed away even earlier, before I was born according to my father. Heart failure. He had been a difficult man, my father said. They had not been close. That was the extent of what I knew. I accepted it without question, because why would a child doubt what her father told her? Parents are supposed to tell the truth. They are supposed to protect you from lies, not wrap you in them. I was 27 years old when I discovered the truth. It happened by accident, the way so many life-changing discoveries do. My mother was downsizing, moving from the house where I had grown up to a smaller condominium that would be easier to maintain. I went over one weekend to help her sort through decades of accumulated possessions. We spent hours going through boxes of old clothes and forgotten appliances and photo albums that made us both laugh and cry. Near the end of the day, I found a box in the back of a closet that I had never seen before. It was sealed with tape that had yellowed with age. When I asked my mother about it, she looked uncomfortable. "That is some old mail," she said. "Things that came to the house for you when you were little. I should have thrown it away years ago." Curiosity got the better of me. I opened the box. Inside were dozens of envelopes, all addressed to me, Madeline Harrison. The return address was somewhere in Duluth, Minnesota. The sender was identified simply as Grandpa Walter. My hands trembled as I opened the first envelope. Inside was a birthday card with a cartoon elephant on the front. Inside the card was a message written in shaky handwriting. "To my dearest granddaughter on your first birthday. I hope to meet you someday. I think about you every day. Love, Grandpa." Tucked into the card was a check for $100. It had never been cashed. I opened another envelope. Another birthday card, another check, another message of love from a grandfather I had been told was dead. There were cards for every year from my first birthday until my 10th. After that, they stopped. Each one contained the same wish. "I hope to meet you someday." Each one contained a check that had never been deposited. I counted them. $900 in total from a man who supposedly died before I was born. I turned to my mother with tears streaming down my face. She was crying too. "I should have told you," she said. "I am so sorry, Madeline. I should have told you years ago." She sat down heavily and began to explain. My grandfather, Walter Harrison, had not died. He was very much alive. He and my father had a falling out when I was just a baby. My father had cut off all contact and forbidden my mother from telling me the truth. After the divorce, my mother had considered reaching out to Walter, but she was afraid it would complicate things. She was afraid my father would use it against her somehow. And as years passed, the secret became harder to reveal. How do you tell a child that her father lied about something so fundamental? How do you explain that a grandfather who wanted to know her was kept away deliberately? So she kept the cards. She could not bring herself to throw them away. She always intended to give them to me someday. She just never found the right moment. Until now. I drove to Duluth the following weekend. It took about 3 hours from Minneapolis, and I spent every minute of that drive rehearsing what I would say. I had found the address from the envelopes. I had looked it up online and confirmed it was still a valid residence. My heart pounded as I pulled onto a quiet street near Lake Superior. The house was small but well maintained. A wooden fence surrounded a tidy yard. Wind chimes hung from the porch and sang in the breeze off the lake. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before I found the courage to walk to the front door. I knocked twice and waited. The door opened, and there he was. Walter Harrison was 79 years old, with a full head of white hair and blue eyes that sparkled with intelligence. He was shorter than I expected, slightly stooped with age, but his grip was firm when he took my hand. He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes widening with recognition. Then his face crumpled and tears began to flow. "Madeline," he whispered, "is that really you?" I nodded, unable to speak. He pulled me into a hug and I felt his body shake with sobs. 27 years, he said into my hair. I have waited 27 years for this moment. We stood there on his porch, two strangers who shared the same blood finally reunited after decades of separation. Walter invited me inside, and I stepped into a living room filled with memories. There were photographs everywhere. A young woman with kind eyes, who I would learn was my grandmother Eleanor. A boy at various ages who I recognized as my father. And in the corner, a small collection of photos that made my breath catch. They were pictures of me, school photos that must have been obtained somehow, a newspaper clipping from when I won a spelling bee in 4th grade, a printout of my college graduation announcement. Walter had been following my life from a distance, collecting whatever scraps he could find. He made tea, and we sat together as he told me the story of his life. Walter had been a shipyard worker in Duluth for 40 years. It was honest work, hard work, but it had provided a good life for his family. He and Eleanor had married young, deeply in love. When Gerald was born, Walter thought his life was complete. He coached his son's baseball team. He helped with homework every night. He saved every penny he could for Gerald's future. Then Eleanor got sick. Ovarian cancer diagnosed too late. She fought for 2 years before her body gave out. Gerald was 15 when his mother died. Walter was left to raise a teenage boy alone, while drowning in his own grief. Gerald changed after Eleanor's death. He became withdrawn, then angry, then coldly ambitious. He threw himself into his studies with an intensity that worried Walter. He got excellent grades and earned a scholarship to a prestigious university. Walter was proud, but also concerned. Gerald seemed driven not by passion, but by a desperate need to escape, to become someone different, someone better than the son of a shipyard worker. Walter first noticed the shame during Gerald's college years. Gerald stopped inviting friends home. He made excuses for why Walter could not visit campus. When asked about his family, Gerald would vaguely reference a father in business rather than admit his dad worked with his hands. It hurt, but Walter told himself it was just a phase. Young people were often embarrassed by their parents. Gerald would grow out of it. He did not grow out of it. When Gerald graduated and got his first job at a financial firm, the distance grew wider. Gerald moved to Minneapolis and rarely called. When Walter visited, Gerald seemed tense and eager for him to leave. Then Gerald met Susan, and things briefly improved. Susan was warm and welcoming. She treated Walter like family, insisting he come to dinner, asking about his life, genuinely interested in who he was. For a short time, Walter had hope. When Gerald and Susan got married, Walter attended the wedding with pride. He gave a toast about raising Gerald alone, about the sacrifices they had made together. Gerald barely made eye contact throughout the speech. When I was born, Walter drove down to Minneapolis immediately. He held me in his arms and wept. A granddaughter, a new generation, a chance for a relationship that might heal the wounds with his son. He was wrong. Gerald pulled him aside before he left and delivered words that still haunted Walter decades later. "Dad, Gerald had said you do not fit into my life anymore. My colleagues think I come from a successful family. They cannot know my father is a shipyard worker. It is embarrassing. Please do not contact us again." Walter had been devastated. He tried reaching out anyway. He sent letters. He sent birthday cards to me with checks that were never cashed. He called and left voicemails that were never returned. After a few years, he received a letter from a lawyer. Gerald had threatened a restraining order if Walter continued attempting to contact the family. Walter stopped trying after that, but he never stopped loving. He never stopped wondering. He never stopped hoping that someday, somehow, he would meet his granddaughter. What Walter did not know until I told him was that Gerald had gone further than just cutting off contact. Gerald had told everyone, including his new wife Victoria, that Walter was dead. To the world, Walter Harrison had died of heart failure when I was a baby. A convenient lie that erased any questions about why Gerald never mentioned his father. A lie that allowed Gerald to reinvent himself completely without any ties to his working-class past. When I told Walter this, he sat in silence for a long time. A single tear rolled down his weathered cheek. He said his own son killed him, he finally said, made him a ghost while he was still breathing. I reached across and took his hand. "Not anymore," I said. "I found you. You are real to me." From that day forward, Walter and I built the relationship we had both been denied. I drove to Duluth at least once a month. We talked on the phone every week. He told me stories about my grandmother Eleanor, about my father as a boy, about the history I had been cut off from. I told him about my life, my work as a graphic designer at a Minneapolis agency, my dreams for the future. He became the grandfather I never had. and I became the granddaughter he had always wanted. For 2 years, I kept this relationship secret from my father, not because I was ashamed, but because I did not think Gerald deserved to know. He had lied to me my entire life. He had denied me a grandfather who loved me. Why should I give him any information about the family he had discarded? The call came on a Tuesday evening about a month before my father's 60th birthday. I was at home in my apartment cooking dinner after a long day at work when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I recognized but rarely saw. Victoria. My stepmother almost never contacted me directly. When communication was necessary, it usually came through my father, or more often, not at all. I answered with caution. Victoria's voice was as cold and polished as always. She dispensed with pleasantries and got straight to the point. Gerald's 60th birthday was coming up, a milestone celebration. They were planning an elegant dinner party at the Lexington in St. Paul. Very exclusive, very sophisticated. However, she continued, this was an adults-only event. No children allowed. I almost laughed. I was 29 years old. I had been legally an adult for over a decade. But before I could point this out, Victoria continued. The rule applied to everyone. Stephanie and Brandon would not be attending either. Gerald wanted her to let me know so I would not feel left out. Something about her tone did not sit right with me. There was a smugness beneath the polished exterior, but I let it go. I thanked her for the information and asked her to wish Gerald a happy birthday on my behalf. After I hung up, I tried to push the conversation out of my mind. It was just another example of being excluded from my father's life. I should have been used to it by now, but a small part of me had hoped foolishly that a 60th birthday might be different, that my father might want his only biological child present for such a significant milestone. Apparently not. 2 weeks before the party, I ran into someone unexpected. I was meeting a friend for coffee at a cafe in downtown St. Paul when I spotted a familiar face at another table, Kayla Morrison. We had gone to high school together, though we had not been particularly close. After a few minutes of catching up, I learned that Kayla now worked as an event coordinator at the Lexington, the same restaurant where my father's birthday would be held. We chatted about work, about mutual friends, about how strange it was to run into each other after so many years. Then Kayla said something that made my blood run cold. She mentioned she was busy with a big event coming up, a 60th birthday party for someone named Gerald Harrison. I confirmed that was my father, and Kayla smiled. Small world, she said. Then almost offhandedly, she mentioned looking forward to meeting his stepchildren. Stephanie and Brandon were on the guest list. So were their partners, Stephanie's fiancé, Brandon's girlfriend. About 30 people total, all confirmed. I felt like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. No children allowed. That was what Victoria had told me. But Stephanie and Brandon, both adults like me, were attending, with their partners. The rule had never been about children. It had been about excluding me specifically. My father did not want me at his 60th birthday party. He had instructed Victoria to lie to keep me away. That night, I called my father directly. It was the first time I had initiated contact in months. He answered on the fourth ring, sounding surprised. Madeline, is everything okay? I forced my voice to stay calm. I heard Stephanie and Brandon are coming to your birthday, I said. There was silence on the other end, long enough for me to know I was right. Who told you that he finally asked? Does it matter? I replied. Victoria said no children allowed, but your stepchildren are invited. More silence. Then my father sighed heavily. It is complicated, he said. Victoria thought it would be better this way. You would not enjoy the crowd anyway. They are all business associates and family friends. You would not know anyone. Better for whom I asked. He did not answer, so I pressed further. Just tell me the truth, Dad. You do not want me there. What followed was the most honest conversation my father and I had ever had. And it was brutal. He admitted that Victoria had suggested I not be invited. She felt I did not fit in with their social circle. My career as a graphic designer was not impressive enough. My lack of a husband or children at 29 was concerning. My presence might raise awkward questions about Gerald's first marriage, about the daughter he rarely mentioned. And honestly, my father said, his voice turning cold, I agreed with her. You always make everything about yourself, Madeline. This is my birthday. I get to decide who comes. And I decided you are not part of the guest list. I did not cry. I did not argue. I simply said, "Happy birthday, Dad," and hung up. Then I sat in the dark of my apartment and let the reality wash over me. My father had deliberately excluded me from his 60th birthday, not because of some reasonable rule, but because he was ashamed of me, because I did not fit the perfect image he had constructed, because I was the one thing he could not fully erase from his past. That night I called Walter. I told him everything about Victoria's lie, about my father's admission, about the 60th birthday party I was not welcome to attend. Walter listened in silence, then spoke softly. "Gerald has always been ashamed of where he came from," he said. "Now he is ashamed of his own daughter, too. I am so sorry, sweetheart. You deserve better." I wiped my tears and asked the question that had been forming in my mind. "Grandpa, are you free next Saturday?" He paused. "I am always free. Why do you ask?" I explained my idea. The Lexington, the same night, our own dinner, a chance for Gerald to see that the people he had thrown away had found each other. Walter understood immediately. "You want him to see us together," he said. I want him to know I replied that his lies did not break us, that his rejection did not destroy me, that I have family who loves me even if he cannot. Walter was quiet for a moment. Then he laughed softly. "I will wear my best suit," he said. The day of my father's birthday arrived gray and cold, typical for Minnesota in late autumn. I woke early and drove to Duluth to pick up my grandfather. The route was familiar by now, and I let my mind wander as the highway stretched before me. I thought about what we were about to do. Some might call it petty. Some might call it revenge. But to me it felt like something else entirely. It felt like truth. My father had built his entire life on lies. Lies about his background. Lies about his father. Lies about his own daughter. Tonight, some of those lies would unravel. Walter was waiting on his porch when I arrived. He wore a charcoal gray suit that looked impeccable, a navy blue tie, and shoes polished to a mirror shine. He looked distinguished, elegant, nothing like the embarrassing working-class father Gerald had described. When I complimented his appearance, Walter smiled. "Your grandmother gave me this tie," he said, 40 years ago. I have been saving it for a special occasion." He climbed into my car and we began the drive back to Minneapolis. We talked about everything and nothing. About the weather, about a book he was reading, about a recipe he wanted to try. Neither of us mentioned Gerald. Neither of us needed to. We both knew what was coming. We checked into a hotel near the restaurant around 4 in the afternoon. I had booked us rooms the week before, not wanting the evening to be rushed. We would have a nice dinner, see what happened, and then return to the hotel without any pressure to drive home that night. I changed into a dress I had bought specifically for the occasion. Emerald green silk that fell just below my knees. Elegant, but not ostentatious. I wanted to look good, but not like I was trying too hard. Walter approved when he saw me. "You look beautiful," he said. "Just like your grandmother on our first date." We arrived at the Lexington at 7 o'clock sharp. The restaurant was housed in a historic building in St. Paul, all dark wood and white tablecloths, and the kind of understated elegance that appealed to the wealthy crowd my father ran with. Kayla had helped me secure a reservation in the main dining room. Our table was positioned perfectly, close enough to the private dining space where Gerald's party would be held that we might see guests coming and going, but far enough that we would not be intruding. I wanted my father to see us, but I did not want to crash his party. A host led us to our table. Walter pulled out my chair for me, a gentleman of another era. We ordered cocktails and studied the menu, trying to pretend this was just an ordinary dinner. But my hands trembled slightly as I held the menu. My heart beat faster than normal. Somewhere in this building, my father was preparing to celebrate 60 years of life, surrounded by people who fit his carefully curated image. He had no idea that his biggest secrets were sitting just a few dozen feet away. Our drinks arrived. Walter raised his glass. "To family," he said. "The real kind." We clinked glasses and drank. The cocktail was strong and I felt some of my tension ease. Whatever happened tonight, I was here with someone who loved me unconditionally. That was more than my father could say about most of the people at his party. Around 7:30, guests began arriving for Gerald's celebration. I watched discreetly as familiar faces passed by the entrance to the private dining room. First came some people I did not recognize, business associates probably, men in expensive suits and women in designer dresses. Then I saw Stephanie. She looked stunning in a black cocktail dress, her arm linked with a tall man I assumed was her fiancé. They walked past without noticing me disappearing into the private space. Brandon followed a few minutes later with a pretty brunette who must have been his girlfriend. He was scrolling through his phone as he walked, barely paying attention to his surroundings. Then Victoria arrived. She swept into the restaurant like she owned it, her champagne-colored gown catching the light. Her blonde hair was perfectly coiffed. Diamonds sparkled at her ears and throat. She greeted the host with the kind of practiced warmth that never quite reached her eyes. I watched her disappear into the party and felt a cold satisfaction. She had no idea what was coming. Finally, my father appeared. Gerald Harrison, at 60 years old. His hair had gone silver since I last saw him, but it was styled impeccably. He wore a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He was talking animatedly with another man, gesturing broadly, laughing at something. He looked confident, successful, happy. He walked past our table without a glance, absorbed in his conversation. He did not see me. He did not see Walter. Not yet. I turned back to my grandfather and found him watching Gerald with an expression I could not read. Sadness, perhaps, or resignation. "That is my boy Walter," said quietly. "The one I raised alone after Eleanor died. The one I sacrificed everything for. I barely recognize him." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. The night was still young. We were halfway through our main course when it happened. Walter had ordered salmon, and I had chosen the steak. We were talking about his garden of all things. He had been growing tomatoes the past summer, and they had turned out beautifully. He was planning to try peppers next year. Normal conversation. Comfortable. Almost forgetting where we were. Then I looked up and saw my father standing in the middle of the dining room, frozen like a statue. He had apparently left the private party, perhaps heading to the restroom. His path took him through the main dining area, and somewhere along that path, his eyes had found our table, found me, then moved to the man sitting across from me. I watched the blood drain from my father's face. His mouth opened slightly. His eyes went wide. He looked quite literally like he had seen a ghost, because to him he had. Walter Harrison, the father Gerald had declared dead 15 years ago. Alive, breathing, dining with the daughter Gerald had excluded from his birthday. For a long moment, nobody moved. Gerald stood paralyzed. Walter looked up from his salmon, meeting his son's eyes for the first time in almost 2 decades. I sat perfectly still watching the scene unfold. Then Gerald broke free from his shock and strode toward our table. His face had shifted from pale disbelief to red-faced anger. His hands were clenched at his sides. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded in a harsh whisper, trying not to attract attention from the other diners. I set down my fork calmly. "Hello, Dad. Happy birthday." Gerald ignored me completely. His eyes were locked on Walter. "What is he doing here? You told everyone I was dead. That is what he is doing here." The words came from Walter, quiet but steady. He did not flinch under his son's glare. Gerald's jaw tightened. "You should not be here. Neither of you should be here. This is my night, my celebration. You are ruining everything." I finally spoke again, my voice louder than I intended. "Ruining what? Your perfect image. Your carefully constructed lies." I stood up from my chair, tired of looking up at my father, tired of making myself small in his presence. "You told me no children allowed at your birthday. But Stephanie and Brandon are in that room right now, with their partners. The only child you banned was me." Gerald's face twisted. "That is none of your business. I get to decide who celebrates with me. And you," he jabbed a finger toward Walter, "you are supposed to be out of my life. I made that clear years ago." Walter rose slowly from his chair. He was shorter than Gerald, older, more fragile. but something in his bearing commanded respect. "I never wanted to be out of your life," he said. "You pushed me away because you were ashamed. Ashamed of where you came from. Ashamed of a father who worked with his hands. I built my life with honest labor, Gerald. I raised you alone after your mother died. I gave you everything I had. And this is how you repay me. By telling people I am dead." Gerald's voice dropped to a vicious hiss. "You do not understand. My colleagues, my friends, they come from different backgrounds. They have money, education, connections. If they knew my father was a shipyard worker living in some rundown house in Duluth, they would look at me differently. Everything I have built would crumble." Walter shook his head slowly. "The only thing crumbling is your soul, Gerald. You have lied to everyone. Your wife, your stepchildren, your colleagues, your own daughter. How do you live with yourself?" Before Gerald could respond, the door to the private dining room opened. Victoria stepped out, her face pinched with irritation. "Gerald, she called the guests are asking for you. What is taking so long?" Then she saw the scene at our table. Her eyes moved from Gerald to me to Walter, trying to piece together what was happening. "Gerald, who are these people?" Gerald opened his mouth to lie. I could see it forming on his lips. Some excuse, some dismissal. But I was faster. "I am Madeline," I said clearly. "Gerald's daughter, his biological daughter, the one you told not to come tonight. And this," I gestured to Walter, "is Walter Harrison, Gerald's father, my grandfather, the one Gerald told you died 15 years ago." Victoria's perfectly composed face faltered. "What?" She turned to Gerald with confusion that quickly shifted to anger. "You told me your father died before we met. You said he had a heart attack when Madeline was a baby." By now, other guests had drifted out of the private room, curious about the commotion. Stephanie and her fiancé, Brandon and his girlfriend, several of Gerald's business associates. They clustered near the doorway, watching with undisguised interest. Gerald stood in the center of it all, his perfect evening collapsing around him. One of the businessmen, a tall man with graying temples, stepped forward. "Gerald, is this true? You told me you had no living family. I remember you saying that when we first met." Gerald's face was scarlet. He looked around desperately, searching for an escape that did not exist. "It is complicated," he stammered. "My father and I had a falling out. We did not speak for years. It was easier to say he had passed than explain the situation." Walter's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. "Easier to erase me completely. Easier to pretend I never existed." His voice was not angry, but infinitely sad. "I worked 60-hour weeks to give you opportunities, Gerald. I took night classes to help with your homework. I went without so you could have. And when you became successful, when you built this life, you are so proud of, you decided I was an embarrassment, a stain on your perfect image." Victoria turned to her husband with new eyes. "What else have you lied about?" Her voice was sharp. "About your past, about your finances, about your first marriage." Gerald sputtered but could not form a coherent response. Stephanie stepped forward, her face a mixture of shock and disgust. "Wait," she said. "So your father is alive. You have been lying to us for 15 years, and you excluded your own daughter from your birthday but invited us." "That is messed up, Dad." The title Dad on Stephanie's lips seemed to wound Gerald. These were the children he had chosen over me. And now, even they were looking at him with judgment. I picked up my clutch from the table. "We did not come here to make a scene," I said to the gathered crowd. "I came here to have dinner with my grandfather. The grandfather I only discovered 2 years ago because my father told me he was dead. We chose this restaurant. We chose this night. Not to ruin anything but to stop hiding." I looked at Gerald directly. "I spent my entire life trying to earn your love, trying to be good enough, wondering why you treated Stephanie and Brandon better than your own flesh and blood. Now I know I was never going to be good enough because I reminded you of where you came from, of who you really are. But I am done seeking your approval. I have family who loves me. Real family." I took Walter's arm. "Happy 60th birthday, Dad. I hope the party is everything you wanted it to be." We walked together through the dining room, past the stunned faces of Gerald's guests, past Victoria, with her mouth still hanging open, past my father standing alone in the wreckage of his lies. Neither of us looked back. The drive back to the hotel was quiet. Walter stared out the window at the passing lights, and I focused on the road, neither of us needing to fill the silence with words. When we reached the hotel, we sat in the parking lot for a few minutes, just breathing. That was harder than I expected, Walter finally said. I nodded, seeing him, knowing what he has become. Part of me still remembers the little boy who used to follow me around the shipyard asking questions about everything. I do not know where that boy went. I took my grandfather's weathered hand in mine. That boy made a choice, I said, a long time ago. He chose appearance over authenticity, success over family, image over love. That is not your fault, Grandpa. You loved him. You did everything right. He is the one who walked away. We went inside and said goodnight at our doors. Walter hugged me tightly longer than usual. Thank you, he whispered, for finding me, for giving me a granddaughter. Whatever happens with Gerald, I will always have you. I hugged him back just as fiercely. And I will always have you. I did not sleep well that night. The adrenaline took hours to fade. I kept replaying the scene in my mind. Gerald's face when he saw Walter, Victoria's shock, Stephanie's disgust. I had not planned to create such a spectacle. I had only wanted my father to know that his lies had consequences, that the people he discarded had not disappeared. But the truth, once exposed, had taken on a life of its own. The following morning, Walter and I had breakfast at a diner before I drove him home to Duluth. Pancakes and eggs and too much coffee. We talked about everything except the previous night. His garden plans, a documentary he wanted to watch, a book he thought I would enjoy. Normal things. Safe things. By the time I dropped him off at his little house by Lake Superior, we were both smiling again. Over the following weeks, the fallout from that night slowly became apparent. Stephanie sent me a text message that surprised me. She apologized for how I had been treated. She said she had not known about any of it. The lies about Walter. The deliberate exclusion. She felt sick about it and wanted me to know she did not share her stepfather's views. I appreciated the gesture, even if I was not sure what to do with it. Brandon also reached out, briefer but sincere. That was wild, he wrote. Hope you are okay. Victoria. I heard through the grapevine had begun questioning everything about her marriage, whether Gerald's success was as self-made as he claimed, whether there were other lies she had not yet uncovered. I did not know the details and did not particularly care. What happened in Gerald's marriage was no longer my concern. My mother called the week after. She had heard about what happened, not from me, but from someone who knew someone who had been at the restaurant. She was worried. I assured her I was fine. Better than fine, actually. I felt lighter than I had in years, like a weight I had been carrying since childhood had finally been lifted. Your grandfather, she said hesitantly. Walter. Is he well? He is wonderful, I told her. He is kind and warm and everything Dad never was. I think you would like him. There was a long pause. Maybe I should meet him sometime, she said. I would like that. About a month after the birthday dinner, my father called. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. His voice was different, tired, subdued, none of the arrogance I was used to. He said he had been thinking about the party, about what I said, about Walter. He admitted he had made mistakes, a lot of them. He did not know if he could fix things, but he wanted me to know he was sorry. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I spoke carefully. I appreciate you saying that, Dad, but sorry is just a word. What matters is what you do next. Whether you change, whether you reach out to Grandpa, whether you stop treating me like an embarrassment. Gerald was quiet for a long moment. I do not know how he admitted. I have been this way for so long. I do not know how to be different. Then figure it out, I said. That is not my job. I cannot heal you. I cannot make you into the father I needed. Only you can do that. And if you cannot, then at least let me go. Stop pretending I am part of your life when you clearly do not want me to be. I hung up after that, not in anger, just in resolution. I had said what I needed to say. The rest was up to him. 6 months have passed since that night. My life has settled into a new rhythm. I visit Walter at least twice a month now. We do not hide anymore. He came to Minneapolis for Thanksgiving, and my mother joined us. It was awkward at first, but gradually became comfortable. 3 generations of people who had been separated by one man's lies, finally coming together. I still work at the design agency, though I was recently promoted to senior designer. The work fulfills me in ways I did not expect, creating beautiful things out of nothing, bringing visions to life. Maybe that is why I connected so strongly with Walter. He built ships, I build brands. We are both makers. Gerald has not changed. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He sent a Christmas card with a generic message. He left a voicemail on my birthday that lasted 30 seconds. Small gestures that felt more like obligation than genuine connection. I do not expect more. I have learned to stop waiting for him to become the father I deserved. Because here's what I finally understand. My father's inability to love me was never about me. It was about him, his shame, his insecurity, his desperate need to appear successful at any cost. He sacrificed his father and his daughter on the altar of image. That is his burden to carry, not mine. If you are watching this and you have ever felt invisible to someone who should have loved you, please hear me. Their blindness does not diminish your worth. Their rejection does not define your value. You are not responsible for someone else's inability to see what is right in front of them. The night of my father's 60th birthday, he looked at me like he had seen a ghost. But the real ghost was not Walter. It was the person my father used to be. The boy who loved his father. The man who might have been a good dad. That person disappeared long ago. I have stopped waiting for him to come back. Now I focus on the family I do have. A mother who has always supported me. A grandfather who waited decades for the chance to know me. Friends who see my worth without requiring me to prove it. And myself. My own love, my own respect, my own approval. That is more than enough. It always was. I would love to hear your thoughts on this story. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything? Have you had to let go of hoping for a parent's love? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope that wherever you are, you know your worth. I hope you have people in your life who see you, truly see you. And if you do not have that yet, I hope you keep looking, because the family you deserve is out there. Sometimes it is blood, sometimes it is chosen. Either way, you are worthy of being loved. Take care of yourselves. I will see you in the next story.